A man sits at a desk. He writes a note to his ex-wife. I resolved some time ago that the next time my security and future is threatened or seriously jeopardized, it's time, my time, to go fighting. He folds the note, places his will on the bed, opens a guitar case. Inside, 2 claw hammers, 2 club hammers, a spear gun, a knife. He closes the case, drives to Memphis International Airport. He's done this drive hundreds of times. Tomorrow, there's a disciplinary hearing. He believes he's about to lose everything. He believes his children will have nothing. He believes this is the only way to save them. He chose the hammers for a specific reason. Hammer blows to the skull look like injuries sustained in a plane crash. He's not planning to survive this flight. He's planning for what the medical examiner will find in the wreckage. Auburn Calloway graduated from Stanford. He flew for the United States Navy. He earned a black belt in martial arts. He stood 6'2". This is not a man who failed. This is a man who succeeded at everything and still felt the ground disappearing beneath him. FedEx hired him as a flight engineer, not a pilot, a flight engineer. He had the qualifications to fly. He had the hours. He had the credentials. He believed they put him in the lower seat because he was black. Whether that was true, the sources don't resolve. What matters is that Calloway carried it. Every shift, every flight. The weight of a man who believed the system had already decided what he was worth. 4 years before April 7th, 1994, his marriage ended. 2 children, a divorce. And somewhere in the wreckage of that household, Calloway's focus narrowed to a single point: money. Not vague concern about the future, specific, consuming anxiety about college funds, about securities, about the exact dollar amount that would stand between his children and the life he'd lost. He channeled everything into providing. It was the one thing he could still control. Then the floor cracked. When Calloway applied to FedEx, he'd falsified his flight hours. The company found out. A disciplinary hearing was scheduled. April 8th, 1994. And Calloway became certain that he was about to be terminated, that his income would vanish, that his children's futures would collapse, that everything he'd built and everything he'd planned would be taken from him in a single meeting in a conference room in Memphis. He didn't wait to find out if he was right. In the days before April 7th, he transferred over $54,000 in securities and cashier's checks to his ex-wife. He settled his affairs. He wrote the note. He packed the guitar case. He was a Stanford graduate, a Navy pilot, a black belt, a father of 2. And he was convinced, not suspected, not worried, convinced that the only option left was to die in a way that looked like an accident. Because Auburn Calloway had a life insurance policy worth $2.5 million, payable to his children, but only if his death was classified as a workplace accident, not a crime, not a tragedy, an accident. So he needed a plan that would look like one. The plan wasn't rage, it was architecture. He chose hammers, 4 of them, because blunt force trauma to the skull produces fracture patterns consistent with high-impact crash injuries. He wasn't thinking about the attack. He was thinking about autopsies. He was thinking about what a medical examiner would write on a report while standing over bodies pulled from a wreckage field. He thought about the paperwork of death before he thought about death itself. The spear gun was backup. The knife was backup to the backup. The hammers were the plan. He would board FedEx Flight 705, a DC-10 cargo flight from Memphis to San Jose, as a deadhead passenger, off-duty. Riding in the jump seat directly behind the 3-man crew, guitar case at his feet. He would wait until they were airborne. He would strike from behind. 3 men, 3 skulls, hammers to the temporal and parietal bones. Fast, before anyone could react. Then he would crash the plane. Some sources, including Dave Hirschman, who wrote the definitive book on Flight 705, believe Calloway's ultimate target was FedEx headquarters itself. A 300,000-pound DC-10, loaded with fuel, driven into the building that employed him. Maximum harm, maximum symbolism. Hirschman. I personally think that was Calloway's ultimate goal, but he's the only one who knows. He was motivated to do maximum harm to FedEx. But the insurance plan required an accident, not a deliberate act of destruction. The two goals contradicted each other, and Calloway either didn't see the contradiction or didn't care. Or, and this is the possibility worth sitting with, the insurance story was the version he told himself, the one that let a father say, "This is for my children," while packing 4 hammers into a guitar case. Before takeoff, Calloway boarded first. He found the cockpit voice recorder circuit breaker. He pulled it. The CVR would capture everything. Every sound, every word, every hammer strike. He needed it silent. He needed the wreckage to tell a simple story. Mechanical failure, impact, no survivors. The CVR would complicate that story, so he disabled it. Then he sat in the jump seat, guitar case between his legs, and he waited for the crew. The $54,000 was already with his ex-wife. The will was on the bed. The note was folded and placed where it would be found. Auburn Calloway had thought of everything. Almost everything. The crew arrives. Captain David Sanders, 49 years old, 20 years at FedEx, 9 years in the Navy during Vietnam. The steady hand. First Officer James Tucker Jr., 42, 10 years at FedEx, 12 years in the Navy, also Vietnam. Former fighter pilot. The instinct. Flight engineer Andrew Peterson, 39, 5 years at FedEx. The quiet professional. Peterson runs through his pre-flight checks, circuit breakers, systems, routine. And he notices something. The CVR circuit breaker is pulled. It shouldn't be. He doesn't know why it's off. He doesn't think much of it. He flips it back on. A 2-second gesture. Muscle memory. The most important thing anyone does on this aircraft, and Peterson doesn't even register it as significant. He just preserved the evidence of everything that's about to happen. Takeoff is normal. The DC-10 climbs out of Memphis International. 300,000 pounds of aircraft and cargo, heading west towards San Jose. The crew is relaxed. They're chatting. Sanders and Tucker are talking about Crowley's Ridge, Arkansas, the geography, where people live out there. The most ordinary conversation in the world. 2 pilots passing time during a routine climb. On the cockpit voice recorder, the one Calloway disabled, the one Peterson turned back on, you can hear them. Calm voices, easy rhythm. The sound of men who have done this 1,000 times. Then silence. Then hammers. Calloway strikes from behind. No warning, no words first. Just the sound of steel on bone. Peterson takes the first blows. His temporal artery severs. Injuries, immediate and severe, everywhere. The cockpit goes dark. Sanders is next. Hammer to the skull. His scalp splits open. His ear tears nearly free from his head. His jaw dislocates on impact. Tucker, the worst. A hammer strike to the left side of his skull drives bone fragments into the left hemisphere of his brain. The damage is immediate and progressive. His right side begins to fail. Hand first, then arm, then leg. A slow paralysis spreading through his body in real time. Calloway, spear gun raised, pointed at Sanders. Sit down, sit down. Get back in your seat. This is a real one. I'll end you. Sanders, injuries visible across his face, turns to Tucker. 3 words, flat, certain. He's going to end us. Peterson, losing consciousness, his temporal artery failing, does something that changes everything. He grabs the spear from the spear gun. Before Calloway can fire it, he rips it free. Then he shoves Calloway bodily through the cockpit door and into the galley. Dave Hirschman. Andy Peterson grabs the spear gun, which I really admire him for doing, and pushes Calloway out the crew door, and the fight is on in the back. The fight is in the galley now. Sanders follows Peterson through the door. They're grappling with a 6'2" black belt, who still has hammers. And Tucker is alone at the controls, skull fragments pressing deeper into his brain. Right hand going numb, right leg failing. And he is the only person flying this aircraft. James Tucker Jr. is losing his body. He can feel it happening. The paralysis is climbing his right side like water filling a vessel. His hand, his forearm, his grip on the yoke weakening in real time. He is a former Navy fighter pilot. And in this moment, with bone fragments compressing his brain and his crew fighting for their lives 10 feet behind him, he does what a fighter pilot does. He treats the airplane as a tool. No manual describes what Tucker does next. No simulator has ever trained for it. No test pilot has ever attempted it in a DC-10. He pulls the yoke back, 15-degree climb. The 300,000-pound freighter tilts skyward. Then he rolls, 140 degrees to the left. The DC-10 goes nearly inverted, wings past vertical. A cargo freighter, not a fighter jet, not an aerobatic plane, a cargo freighter, hanging almost upside down over Memphis. In the galley, physics transforms. Sanders and Peterson are grappling with Calloway on the floor. Then the floor becomes the ceiling. Gravity reverses. All three men lift off the deck and slam into the overhead. The hammers float. Everything that was down is up. FedEx Captain Mark Lombardo, years later, he literally had it on its backside, and to pull that off structurally, I don't think anybody's ever done that since. Then Tucker pushes the nose down. The DC-10 enters a vertical dive. 300,000 pounds of aircraft, falling. The airspeed indicator climbs, 500 kilometers per hour, 600, 700, 800, 860 kilometers per hour. The needle hits the end of the gauge. It can't read any higher. The plane is going faster. No DC-10 has ever moved this fast, before or since. The aircraft is exceeding speeds its designers never anticipated. The structural limits are theoretical now. Tucker is flying beyond the edge of the engineering. His radio transmission, his voice ragged, strained. The sound of a man holding himself together by will alone. Emergency, Express 705. I've been wounded. We've had an attempted takeover on board the airplane. Give me a vector, please. That's to Memphis at this time. Hurry. He requests armed intervention. That is the single most serious request a pilot can make. It means, when we land, have people with authority waiting. Then, quieter, almost private. A sentence that doesn't belong in an emergency transmission. Look, just keep talking to me, okay? He's losing himself. He knows it. The paralysis is taking more of him every minute. His vision is narrowing. His thoughts are fraying. And he asks a stranger, an air traffic controller he has never met and will never meet, to be his tether to consciousness. Just a voice. Just someone talking. Just something to hold on to while his brain shuts down around him. We need an ambulance, and we need armed intervention as well. Back in the galley, 7,000 feet. Sanders makes a decision. He engages the autopilot. Then he leaves the cockpit and goes back to help Peterson. Not to subdue Calloway, to stop him permanently. Sanders is past restraint, past negotiation. Hirschman was right. It wasn't a situation in which talking and trying to de-escalate the situation was going to help. They were in a fight for their lives, from the moment they were attacked. Tucker's maneuvers have pinned Calloway against the galley wall. Sanders reaches him with a hammer, one of Calloway's own hammers, and strikes him. Twice. And Peterson, Andrew Peterson, whose temporal artery has been hemorrhaging since the first blow, whose pressure is dropping toward nothing, who is closer to gone than alive, gathers whatever he has left in his body and delivers the final strike. Calloway goes still. If you're watching this and you've made it this far, you already know this channel doesn't cover stories the easy way. If you're not subscribed, now's the time. Most people who watch these videos aren't subscribed yet. Hit the button. It's free. It helps more than you think. Sanders returns to the cockpit. His ear is dangling from the side of his head. His jaw is dislocated. Dried layers across his face have soaked through his uniform. Tucker is still in the right seat. He can barely move. The right side of his body is largely gone. The plane has a problem beyond the injuries. It's carrying 16,000 kilograms of excess fuel, 35,000 pounds over maximum landing weight. They can't dump it. The fuel dump switches require someone to move through the aircraft to access them, and no one can safely do that. Calloway is unconscious in the galley. Peterson is barely alive beside him. Sanders has to land the plane as it is, overweight, overloaded, with a dangling ear and a jaw that won't close properly. He executes a 90-degree turn, then a 180, descending at a rate that would alarm a healthy pilot in a perfectly functioning aircraft. Memphis International appears below, runway rising to meet them. At 35,000 pounds over maximum landing weight, the tires should explode on contact. The gear should fail. The physics say this landing shouldn't work. The tires hold. The DC-10 touches down, decelerates, rolls. It stops with barely 300 meters of runway remaining. Emergency crews reach Peterson first. He barely has a pulse. Sanders can barely walk. He shares an ambulance with Tucker. They are all alive. Sanders would later say about Tucker, "It saved our lives. What Jim did with that plane, I still can't believe."
They're alive.
But something has been permanently broken. And the reason it was broken, the reason any of this happened at all, that's what comes next. Let's go back to the beginning, to the reason. Auburn Calloway was convinced with the certainty of a man who has stopped asking questions, that FedEx was going to fire him, that the disciplinary hearing on April 8th would end his career, that his children would lose everything, that $2.5 million in life insurance was the only bridge between his kids and ruin. He packed 4 hammers. He disabled the cockpit voice recorder. He transferred $54,000. He wrote his will. He wrote the note. He drove to the airport. He sat in the jump seat. He waited for the right moment. Then he tried to take 3 lives. All of it built on one belief. He was going to be fired. A colleague, someone who had actually flown with Calloway, someone who knew FedEx's disciplinary process from the inside, stated afterward that it was unlikely that FedEx would terminate an employee for such an offense. Falsifying flight hours was serious, no question. But termination for a qualified Stanford-educated Navy pilot, a man with years of service? Probably not. The hearing was April 8th. Calloway never showed up. He never found out what would have happened. He decided the outcome before the outcome existed. He built an entire plan: concealment, insurance, a death designed to look like an accident, on a verdict that almost certainly was never going to come. That's the first thing. Here's the second. Even if it had, even if the absolute worst case had materialized, even if FedEx had walked him out the door on April 8th and he'd never flown again, the plan itself was a fantasy. His design was elegant on paper: incapacitate the crew with hammers, crash the plane. Medical examiner finds blunt force injuries consistent with impact. Insurance company classifies it as a workplace accident. $2.5 million flows to his children. But the crew would have had hammer wounds, repeated strikes, specific patterns. Blunt force trauma from a hammer leaves signatures that no crash produces. The angles are wrong. The distribution is wrong. The fracture patterns don't match high-velocity impact. And the spear gun would be in the wreckage, and the knife. Insurance companies investigate pilot crashes with forensic intensity. It is the single most scrutinized category of death claim in the industry. The payout would almost certainly have been denied. The entire architecture, the months of planning, the careful selection of tools, the financial transfers, the will, the note, all of it was built on a threat that probably didn't exist, designed around a payout that probably would never have come. So what was it actually about? Go back to the note, read it again, slowly this time. I resolved some time ago that the next time my security and future is threatened or seriously jeopardized, it's time, my time, to go fighting. Some time ago. Not last week, not when the hearing was scheduled, not in response to April 8th. Some time ago. Auburn Calloway wasn't reacting to the hearing. He was waiting for it. He needed a reason, a trigger, something external he could point to and say, "This is why." The disciplinary hearing gave him that. For my children wasn't a strategy. It was a story he told himself so he could do what he'd already decided to do. The threat was phantom. The plan was impossible. And the love was real, but it was wrapped around something else entirely, something that had been building for a long time, something the hearing didn't create, only permitted. Now the cost. James Tucker Jr., 3 major surgeries, 2.5 years of rehabilitation, relearning how to walk, relearning how to talk. He was a Navy fighter pilot who put a DC-10 through maneuvers no test pilot has ever replicated. Inverted flight, a vertical dive past the limits of the airspeed gauge, and bone fragments from Auburn Calloway's hammer took that from him forever. He was never medically cleared to fly again. Andrew Peterson came within minutes of losing his life at 20,000 feet, his temporal artery severed by the first blow, failing for the duration of a fight that lasted the length of a descent from cruise altitude to 7,000 feet. He barely had a pulse when paramedics reached him. He never flew again. David Sanders. The man who landed an overweight DC-10 with a dangling ear and a dislocated jaw, who stopped with 300 meters of runway to spare, who made the decision at 7,000 feet to leave the controls and go stop the man who was trying to end them. He never flew again. 3 men, 3 careers ended, 3 lives permanently reshaped, because one man convinced himself he was about to lose something he probably was never going to lose. And Calloway's children, the ones at the center of everything. The justification for the hammers, and the spear gun, and the will on the bed, and the $54,000, and the note. They received no insurance payout, no inheritance, no protection. Their father is serving 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He didn't protect them. He left them with nothing except the knowledge of what he did, and the story he told about why. The 3 crew members, Sanders, Tucker, and Peterson, became close friends in the years after the attack, bound together by something no one else could understand. And the aircraft, tail number N306FE ADC-10, named John Peter Jr. It sustained $800,000 in damage, structural repairs, new interior. It was returned to service. As of 2019, it was still flying regular cargo routes in and out of the Memphis hub. FedEx pilots know the tail number. They know the story, Captain Mark Lombardo. All of us have flown that airplane. The plane flies. The crew doesn't. One more thing. The original crew, the crew that was supposed to fly Flight 705 that night, they exceeded their 8-hour flight time limit by 1 minute, 60 seconds of overtime. A crew replacement was called. Sanders, Tucker, and Peterson were put on the flight instead. The original crew was 1 man and 1 woman, against a 6'2" black belt armed with 4 hammers and a spear gun. Calloway almost certainly would have succeeded. 60 seconds, that's the margin. The original crew works 1 minute less, and Calloway is in a cockpit with 2 people who almost certainly cannot stop him. The plane goes down. The wreckage tells whatever story it tells, and we probably never know any of this. Everything. Tucker's impossible flying, Peterson's impossible courage, Sanders' impossible landing. All of it exists because of 60 seconds of overtime on a prior flight. The threat was phantom. The plan was impossible. And the only reason it was stopped at all was a margin so thin it barely qualifies as real. If you've watched this far, I'd ask you to consider subscribing. This channel exists because of people who stay until the end and decide the work is worth supporting. If that's you, subscribe, share the video, leave a comment. It all matters. Auburn Calloway's note, one last time, the same words you heard at the beginning, but you hear them differently now. I resolved some time ago that the next time my security and future is threatened or seriously jeopardized, it's time, my time, to go fighting. The first time, it sounded like a desperate father at the end of his rope, a man with no options, a man who had to act. Now you hear the other words. Some time ago. He wasn't reacting. He was waiting. He built a plan that couldn't work against a threat that didn't exist and called it love. 3 men never flew again. 2 children lost their father. A plane still crosses the sky with $800,000 of repaired damage in its frame. He probably was never going to be fired.